If I could go back and have one conversation with myself when I was 30 years old, it would be about money and career. I would have told myself that money can also be used as a tool to fund a completely different future of options, and that I didn't have to wait until 65 to retire if I didn't want to, and that a traditional 9 to 5, with the steady paycheck, isn't the only safe bet when it comes to a career. So that's what I want to talk about in today's video, the things that I wish I had learned in my 30s to set myself up for a better future of options. All right, so let's get into it. So the first topic I want to tackle with this is with saving money. I have always been really good about managing my money, and I've always been a super saver, right? But in my 30s, I primarily saved money to spend it later, right? I saved money, for expensive things, whether it was something expensive that I wanted to buy or do, events that I wanted to go to, travel, whatever. If it was going to cost me more money than I had at the moment, I knew how to sock that money away, to save it for that rainy day. And that was it. That was the extent of saving. And I guess I also saved for emergencies as well, but it wasn't really based on any principle or framework or anything. It was just like, how much money can I afford to set aside, and how much do I think I'll need if something, happened with my car or something like that. It was just more so based on situational, not, based on any other framework, right? So I was really good with that. And what I wish I had learned is that, okay, you've got the saving part down, and it's nice that you're saving for emergencies, but you can also save beyond just to spend and for emergencies. You can save what's called an FU fund, and we're going to call it a Freedom Unlocked fund. I think Stephanie Perry, her YouTube channel, I think that's what they refer to it as, a Freedom Unlocked, I think they call it. But you can be creative. You might be able to, FU, how we use it already, right? But just telling myself, hey, you can start a FU fund. What an FU fund is just money you set aside, you save, to be a nice little cash cushion or safety net if you ever find yourself without a job, whether it's voluntarily or involuntarily. It's money that you have that can cover a certain amount of expenses, monthly expenses, and that's up to you to decide. But what it does is it gives you the option to not have to rush and find another job if you lose your job, and it gives you a bit of breathing room, like, a little bit of breathing room, to help you kind of just decompress, figure out your next moves without feeling rushed and possibly choosing something just for the sake of choosing something just to get a paycheck coming in, right? So in my 30s, I would have saved beyond to spend and for emergencies, and start saving an FU fund. And that's what I impart on you, especially if you're in your 30s and you've never heard of the concept FU fund. You can begin, use that as a starting point to begin your research on how those work. And I plan on doing more content surrounding FU funds, right, in the future. But that's the first thing. Second thing is, okay, you got the saving down, but where are we saving the money, right? A regular savings account's not going to cut it. They don't, you're not allowing your money to at least work for you a little bit here, right? Now, when I was in my, when I was 30 years old, I think I believe high yield savings accounts were out, but they were fairly new. I mean, not brand new, but they were fairly still kind of a new concept. And honestly, I wouldn't have known to look it up then. But what I did kind of understand, and I didn't really understand this until my mid 30s, was that there are other options to be able to earn more interest on the money as opposed to just having it sitting in a regular savings account where it's earning pennies or a fraction of pennies on the dollar. And at the time, my options, I didn't really explore outside of my bank, which was a brick and mortar bank. So they didn't offer high yield savings accounts. So I just was exploring what was available. And the two options that I understood and were comfortable with at the time were CDs and money market accounts, and they both offered higher interest rate. I didn't want to do CDs because you have to lock in the money for a certain amount of time, and I was like, well, that defeats the purpose, because if I need it for an emergency, I don't know when an emergency is going to happen, right? So I opted for a money market account, and it earned a good more interest than just a regular savings account. So it was better than nothing. Still not a ton, at least at the time that I had one. And just looking into more options on how you can earn more interest on your money when it comes to savings accounts. So definitely would have Googled that, looked that up, and chose the option to park it in a high yield savings account. And so that's what I impart on you, is if your money is just sitting in a regular savings account, not earning any interest, pennies on the dollar, like fractions of the pennies on the dollar, it needs to go in a high yield savings account. And I mean, there's a lot of great options for high yield savings accounts. And once I learned what a high yield savings account was, that's what I definitely utilized immediately. But I didn't learn what a high yield savings account was until I was about 39 years old. So right at the end of my 30s, right? And a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about is stuff that I did not know until I was about 38 or 38 going into 39, right? So right at the end of my 30s, okay? So that's the biggest thing when it comes to saving that you want to get started, especially if you're in your 30s now. The sooner the better, right? With saving, parking your savings in a high yield savings account, and saving, start saving your FU fund. No matter what amount you can put aside for it, just start. All right, the sooner the better. Okay. All right. Another thing I would have told myself, my 30-year-old self, is money can be used as a tool to fund a future of options for myself. And what do I mean by that? Because, all right, outside of just, so for me, I primarily just thought of money as just a medium of exchange. You exchange it to get goods and services, right? And to do things, right? Never really fully grasp the concept of how it can be used as a tool to give yourself more options in the future. And I think the reason for that is because my mindset, I only believe that people who were rich had more options to just do whatever they want, right? And that people who weren't rich, like myself, you just had to work. You just had to work hard, you know what I mean? And just make do, with what you had, right? And I just always just believe that a lot of options just weren't available to me because I didn't fit with the picture that was, always socialized to us, right? Always displayed to us when it came to money and investing, right? It always was portrayed as being only available for people who were already rich, people who had a ton of money, and it always was presented as something extremely complicated that you, mere measly mortal, could not understand, right? That's just how I always, felt about investing. Um, and so I just never, that's just what I believed, and that's just kind of where I left it. So I never really explored the options of how can I use money to work as a tool on my behalf, to give myself more options in the future, and understanding that you can use money to buy back your time, your time. And you didn't have to exchange your time for money. That's not the only option. You can use that money to buy back that time that you exchanged. And again, that goes into, saving an FU fund, and then also saving it is not going to do it alone. All right. It's just important that we have that muscle of saving, because it plays into everything else that we are doing when it comes to using money as a tool. But not just saving, but also investing, whether it's investing in the stock market or in real estate or investing in yourself. And when it comes to, I think investing in ourselves is one of those, it's kind of one of those things that may get overlooked, because you don't really think about you learning a new skill set, or starting a business as investing in yourself, right? Um, or just, not necessarily having to learn a skill set per se, but just increasing your knowledge about certain things that ultimately will contribute to you having a better quality of life, investing in yourself in that way, right? Um, and being able to use money as a tool for that. I would go back and tell myself, start now, my 30-year-old self, start now. So that's what I'm imparting on you. Start now, no matter how small of an amount you can put aside, or if it's something that you're interested in doing, or, you've been wanting to start, but you're not sure, when it comes to like learning something new, just start. Right? Just start. The sooner that you get started, the more runway you're giving yourself, right? To come into that lane, to come into your own and begin living the life that you want to live, right? Okay, so the concept of using money as a tool, for me, I didn't understand it until I discovered the FIRE movement. The FIRE movement stands for FIRE stands for financial independence, retire early. And when I say retire, I just mean becoming work optional. Not necessarily, it doesn't mean just completely stop working. It just means having the option to continue to work if you want. But if you don't want to work anymore, you don't have to, because you're financially independent, which means that you've saved and invested enough money so that the interest and dividends earned off of those assets is enough to cover your living expenses. That's what it is to be financially independent. So your money is making money for you, and it's generating enough income. And again, whether it's through the stock market or real estate or business ownership, any type of asset, is kicking off enough income for you to pay all your bills without you actually needing a job, right? So, I wasn't introduced to this concept until I was about 39 years old. Again, I would say 38 on the cusp of 39. So, very late, right at the very end of my 30s, and just just realizing you have options, in that you can use your money. You can save enough money in a shorter amount of time, in order to be able to become work optional, that you don't have to wait until you're 65, like we've been sold the American dream. You work hard your whole life, and then once you turn 65, then you can rest and relax, because that's when your Social Security kicks in, and that's how it goes, right? I bought into that too. I bought into that too. And I would just go back and tell myself, my 30-year-old self, hey, there's a different way that you can, you know, become work optional way before the age of 65. So I offer that to you as a way to maybe start looking into it. Financial independence, retire early, just to kind of get some ideas flowing. I'm always going to advocate for fire. I'm always going to advocate that, people even start on that path, because ultimately you're going to end up, even if you start on the path and even if you never reach financial independence, you're going to definitely end up in a better place financially than you were before, right? So I'm always going to advocate for that, but just I offer that, you know, even if it doesn't have to be with fire, right? Just investing, learning how to figure out how to use money as a tool to give yourself more options, all right? Again, kind of leaning into the investing part, I kind of cross meshed it, but you know, investing in what? Okay, you said, in the stock market and real estate, right? But specifically for me, I'm an advocate of index funds, ETFs, just because, it's, I don't want to say it's easier, but you don't have to put too, how do I say this? It's a easier option, especially if you're overwhelmed and intimidated by, investing. In my opinion, it's an easier way to get introduced to the stock market is just by investing, in low cost broad market ETFs, right? This is not financial advice, but when I say investing in the stock market, that's what I'm talking about. And it doesn't matter like what amount you start with. That's what's awesome about ETFs, because you can start with as little as $1. And even if it's something like $20 a week, I mean $20 a month, whatever, the way I looked at it was, I know for sure I was wasting that amount alone just probably on junk food, right? Or just BS stuff, that I didn't need throughout the week. And I could have been putting that little money, no matter how much it is, or even more, to at least get that muscle working when it comes to investing, right? Starting as soon as possible to give myself a runway, the longest runway possible, to allow that money to work, and grow, right? To give myself more options. So, yes, again, I didn't truly learn what investing was until I was about 39 years old. And what's so crazy was I didn't put it into practice until I hit burnout. And I guess I was about 38 when I discovered fire. So yeah, I think I was about 38 when I discovered fire. And then I experienced burnout for the first time. And that's kind of was the catalyst for me to actually put into practice all of the things that I had learned. Because I had been inhaling personal finance content, whether it was reading ebooks, listening to audiobooks, watching personal finance YouTube channels, and also listening to podcasts. Like, I was inhaling that stuff. Had a lot of time on my hands to do that. Well, actually, no, I wasn't. No, I didn't discover fire until I was about 39. Yeah, I didn't start discover fire. Yeah, it was about 39. Now, I had learned about what investing was at about 38, but my idea of it was still a little bit skewed until I discovered fire and realized that it didn't have to be, complicated, and you don't have to be rich in order to do it, right? So that's kind of what it was. I learned about investing, was trying my attempt at what I thought it was, which I was completely wrong. And I'll save that for another video, because that's really a good story there. But then once I discovered fire, that's when it put everything into perspective, and that's when I actually learned about what investing actually really is and how it works and things of that nature. So, and that was at about 39 years old, and it still took me about a year. It still took me about a year to put it into practice, and that's because burnout fueled that desire to go ahead and do it, right? And last but not least, okay, so I've been hitting a lot on money, saving, and investing. Okay, so let's talk about career. So the biggest thing when it comes to career that I would have told my 30-year-old self, and is that a traditional 9 to 5 where you get a steady paycheck, where you know that paycheck is coming every other week, is not the only safe path to take when it comes to your career, right? And what I'm talking about is, exploring the options of working for yourself, being an entrepreneur, being a solopreneur, beyond actually owning a brick and mortar based storefront, even if it is a service based thing, whether it's a tangible service or not. My idea of it had always been like, if I'm going to be in business for myself, I got to have some kind of, I have to be operating out of some sort of storefront, most likely have employees or, just more complicated. I just had a very complicated view of what, being a business owner was, and a very limited view. And I'm pretty sure I took an entrepreneurship class when I was in undergrad and college. And it was something about it that just wasn't appealing to me. And it was so long ago, but it was just something that, again, I think because it just seemed super complicated. It wasn't presented in a way. It was like presented in a way, well, if you have this amazing idea, you can start, do a startup type situation. But honestly, I can't 100% remember it, but most likely it was something like that. It's something that made it seem a little bit more complicated and involved than I was, willing to, I wasn't interested in that much to be willing to take on that challenge. And I hadn't, and I never been, honestly, up until now. And I'm in my 40s now, and really realizing, oh, you have way more options, and you can be a consultant and work for yourself. You don't have to have a storefront. Like, it doesn't have to be some sort of business that entails, having employees or having things that you have to maintain, and stuff like that. And I know it seems very, might seem like, girl, where you been? But I'm trying to tell you, you don't really realize how a lot of things we're socialized to believe, or things that seem normal, even though we see stuff going on. Like, of course, I know that people are self-employed. I just always thought it was something that was just way too complex, like that I was willing to take on. And so I dismissed it, right? But once learning different ways that you can, be a business owner, and be self-employed, be a solopreneur, and then I would have also looked into high demand careers and skill sets outside of medical and law, right? I would have done that a lot sooner. I didn't explore that until I was about to get out of the Army, right? And by that time, I was in my mid 30s. But throughout my Army career, I had at least 2 times where I could have, if I had have started, looked into this sooner, maybe taken a completely different turn, maybe gotten out of the Army a lot sooner than I did, within when I was in my 30s. But in any event, taking that time to learn about the different ways you can be self-employed, because now, especially with the internet, like the internet just changed the game, and especially with us millennials, we remember the time before the internet and social media, but then we also help usher in that wave, right? And, when we were in our, 20s and stuff, the stuff was like really just, really taking off. Google wasn't as robust as nowhere near as robust as it is now, but it's still, by the time I was in my 30s, though, it definitely was. But in any event, just utilizing that more, the access to information more, to figure out something else that I could do. And because I ultimately ended up staying in one of the biggest reasons I ended up staying in the Army as long as I did was because it was just a safe bet. I was familiar with it, and I hadn't really given much thought to what I would do if I was to get out, because I had no luck before I went into the Army, as far as trying to start a career after college. And that experience had already kind of jaded me. And I just didn't want to get out and be stuck in that same predicament, right? Again, and I let that limit me, when it came to exploring other options. So I offer this again. If you find yourself in a position where even you might have a great job or a good, might have a good job, you're making a great salary, and on paper everything looks right, you're successful, but you just are unhappy or you're unfulfilled, or you just feel like something needs to change, especially when it comes to work, right? Start considering your current skill sets, how that can be used to go into, work for yourself, right? Explore the different options on, how you can turn your skill sets into a business, you know, or if you don't feel like you have enough experience or a certain, skill set that's, in demand, look up in demand skill sets, find something that you're interested in. I'm never going to say find your passion, because that's a whole nother video in and of itself, but something that you're actually interested in, curious about, enough to want to explore it, a certain skill set it is, and go after it, go after it. So I offer that again. The sooner you start, the better. And last but not least, again, just kind of segueing into the time aspect of it, the sooner you start, the better when it comes to the saving your money, investing your, saving, allowing some nice compound interest to take effect, investing, allowing your investments to grow over time, whether it is in the stock market or real estate or owning a business, and just realizing that when you are using money as a tool, time is going to be the thing that you want time to be on your side, right? You want it to help, tip the scales in your favor. And when it comes to, using money as a tool, it's one of the ways you can buy back your time, right?